The interrogation chamber, the detention cell aboard the Zephyrian war vessel Silent Judgment, hummed with the low frequency of containment fields. Commander Thylex studied the human prisoner through the reinforced transparisteel, his four eyes analyzing every detail with the precision of a career military officer. The creature before him looked nothing like the terrifying warriors from Zephyrian propaganda broadcasts. Captain Sarah Chun sat motionless in the interrogation chair, her wrists secured by energy shackles that glowed with a soft blue light. Her Terran Defense Coalition uniform was torn and stained with dried blood, the captain's insignia barely visible on her collar. Dark hair fell across her face in matted strands, and her breathing came in shallow, controlled intervals. To most observers, she appeared to be just another broken human, defeated by superior Zephyrian technology and tactics, but something about her stillness bothered Thylex. In his 15 cycles of military service, he had interrogated dozens of species across the galaxy. Fear manifested differently in each race, but it always manifested. The Altarian bird people would chirp frantically when captured. The silicon-based Cordani would vibrate at frequencies that could shatter glass. Even the notoriously stoic Martok warriors would show subtle signs of distress through changes in their bioluminescent patterns. This human showed nothing, no trembling, no darting glances seeking escape routes, no pleading or bargaining. She simply sat there, as if waiting for a routine medical appointment rather than an interrogation that could determine the fate of entire star systems. Thylex activated the cell's communication array with a gesture from his primary manipulator arm. Prisoner 7 Alpha 9, state your designation and unit affiliation. Sarah raised her head slowly, revealing eyes the color of Earth's ancient oceans. When she spoke, her voice carried no emotion, just the mechanical recitation of someone following military protocol. Captain Sarah Elizabeth Chun, Terran Defense Coalition, 42nd Reconnaissance Battalion, Service Number TDC 7749 XR. Your vessel was destroyed 6 rotations ago during an unauthorized incursion into Zephyrian space, Thylex continued, consulting his data tablet. The transport ship Meridian Dawn was carrying illegal mining equipment to the contested world of Kepler 442. You were the sole survivor among a crew of 38, Sarah corrected quietly. Thylex's head crest flickered with annoyance. Excuse me, 38 crew members. Your intelligence files Miss Chief Engineer Martinez. She was working in the auxiliary bay when your ships attacked. The correction was delivered without malice or sarcasm, just a simple statement of fact that somehow made it more irritating. Thylex had spent considerable time reviewing the incident reports, and his analysts were known for their thoroughness. The possibility that they had missed a crew member suggested either incompetence or deliberate misdirection by Terran forces. Very well. 38. All dead except you. How remarkably fortunate. Something flickered across Sarah's face at that comment, but it passed too quickly for Thylex to interpret. Fortune had nothing to do with it, Commander. Thylex circled the interrogation chamber, his clawed feet clicking against the polished deck plates. The sound echoed in the small space, creating a rhythm intended to increase psychological pressure on prisoners. It was a technique that had proven effective across multiple species, exploiting the nearly universal fear response to predatory sounds. Sarah's pulse rate, monitored by sensors built into her restraints, remained steady at 68 beats per minute. The mining colony on Kepler 442 was established in violation of the Treaty of Proxima Centauri, Thylex stated. Article 7, Section 12 specifically prohibits Terran expansion beyond the agreed-upon boundaries. Your mission was an act of war. The colony was established to provide medical supplies to refugees from the Vega system, Sarah replied. Article 3, Section 4 of the same treaty guarantees humanitarian aid corridors. The mining operation was secondary, intended to fund the relief efforts. Thylex paused in his pacing. The human's knowledge of interstellar law was more comprehensive than expected. Most soldiers knew only the basic operational guidelines relevant to their specific missions. This level of legal expertise suggested either advanced intelligence training or significant command experience. Humanitarian aid, he repeated, testing the words. Is that what humans call territorial expansion now? Is that what Zephyrians call genocide? Sarah asked, meeting his gaze directly. The question hung in the air between them like a charged particle. Thylex felt his gill slits flutter with the Zephyrian equivalent of surprise. In all his years of conducting interrogations, no prisoner had ever turned the questioning back on him with such directness. The response showed either remarkable courage or complete disconnection from reality. The Zephyrian Republic does not engage in genocide, he said, falling back on official doctrine. We conduct targeted military operations to maintain regional stability and protect legitimate territorial claims. Targeted military operations, Sarah repeated. That's an interesting way to describe what happened to the civilian settlements on Tau Ceti Prime. Thylex's crest went rigid. The Tau Ceti incident was classified at the highest levels of Zephyrian command. The orbital bombardment of those settlements had been necessary to eliminate a terrorist cell that had been using civilians as human shields. The fact that this prisoner knew about it suggested intelligence capabilities far beyond what the Zephyrian military had attributed to human forces. You seem remarkably well-informed for a reconnaissance officer, he observed. I read a lot, Sarah said simply. What were you really doing in Zephyrian space, Captain Chun? For the first time since the interrogation began, Sarah was silent for several heartbeats. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Looking for someone. Who? A friend. Thylex consulted his tablet again. According to our records, the Meridian Dawn's manifest listed no personal passengers. The crew consisted entirely of military personnel and civilian contractors. Some friends aren't on the manifest. The cryptic nature of her responses was beginning to frustrate Thylex. He had expected either defiant propaganda or broken cooperation, not this strange mix of compliance and evasion. The human answered his questions but revealed nothing of substance. It was like trying to grasp water with his claws. Captain Chen, I will ask you directly. What was the true purpose of your mission to Kepler 442? Sarah considered the question for a long moment. We were there to bring someone home. Someone who didn't want to come home. Someone who couldn't come home. There's a difference. Thylex activated a secondary scanner, checking Sarah's biometrics for signs of deception. Heart rate, brain activity, stress hormones, even cellular electrical patterns were all within normal ranges. Either she was telling the truth, or she possessed the kind of mental discipline that typically required years of specialized training. This someone you were looking for, were they being held against their will? In a manner of speaking, by Zephyrian forces, by circumstances. The non-answers were becoming maddening. Thylex slammed his primary fist against the bulkhead, the sound ringing through the chamber like a gunshot. Speak plainly, human. I have neither the time nor the patience for riddles. Sarah looked up at him with what might have been sympathy. Commander, has anyone ever told you that you have beautiful eyes? The completely unexpected comment left Thylex speechless. In 15 cycles of military service, through battles that had claimed thousands of lives and interrogations that had broken the will of hardened warriors, no one had ever complimented his appearance. The four-eyed Zephyrian facial structure was considered intimidating by most species, designed by evolution for predatory efficiency rather than aesthetic appeal. What did you say he managed? Your eyes, all four of them. They're remarkable. The way the inner pupils dilate independently to track multiple targets, while the outer ones maintain peripheral awareness. It's fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint. Thylex found himself stepping closer to the containment field, studying this strange human who could discuss his anatomical features with scientific detachment while facing potential execution. Are you attempting to flatter me? I'm making an observation, Sarah said. On Earth, we have a saying, know your enemy. But I don't think you're my enemy, Commander. I think you're just following orders, same as I was. I am a loyal officer of the Zephyrian Republic. I never said you weren't. Loyalty and understanding aren't mutually exclusive. Thylex's communication implant chimed with an incoming priority message from the ship's bridge. He activated the secure channel with visible reluctance. Commander, this is Navigation Officer Keth. We're receiving long-range sensor contacts. Multiple vessels approaching our position. Bearing 27 Mark IV. Classification: unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match any vessels in our database. Thylex glanced at Sarah, who was watching him with those unervingly calm blue eyes. Time to intercept. Approximately 47 minutes at current approach speed. Maintain course and alert tactical command. I'll be on the bridge shortly. He deactivated the channel and turned back to his prisoner. It seems your rescue mission has arrived, Captain. Sarah tilted her head slightly, like someone listening to a sound only she could hear. Maybe. Or maybe something else entirely. What do you mean? Commander, when you look at me, what do you see? The question seemed simple, but Thylex suspected it was anything but. He studied her carefully, taking in the torn uniform, the controlled posture, the steady gaze that never wavered. I see a human soldier who was captured during an illegal operation. And that's all? What else should I see? Sarah leaned back in her restraints, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the kind of smile that suggested hidden knowledge, secrets that could change everything if revealed. You see what you expect to see, Commander. A defeated enemy. A broken prisoner. Someone who poses no threat to your mission or your crew. Are you saying that assessment is incorrect? I'm saying that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the thing you don't notice. Thylex felt a chill run along his spine ridges, a primitive response to perceived threat that no amount of military training could completely suppress. Explain. Sarah's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than he remembered. You asked me what I was really doing in Zephyrian space, Commander. I told you I was looking for someone. Yes. I never said I was looking for someone else. The implications of that statement hit Thylex like a plasma bolt to the chest. He stepped back from the containment field, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. You're saying you were looking for yourself. I'm saying that 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago, Captain Sarah Elizabeth Chin died in a Zephyrian interrogation facility on Rigel 7. The question you should be asking, Commander, is who exactly you've been talking to. The lights in the detention chamber flickered, and somewhere in the distance, Thylex could hear the first warning klaxons beginning to sound. Whatever was approaching his ship, it was about to make this conversation considerably more complicated. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if preparing for something she had been anticipating for a very long time. Tell me, Commander, she said without opening her eyes, when you order someone to act like a soldier, what exactly do you expect them to do? The revelation, the klaxons aboard the Silent Judgment continued their urgent wailing as Commander Thylex stared at his prisoner. Sarah Chun remained perfectly still in her restraints, but something fundamental had changed in the air between them. The dynamic that had defined their conversation for the past hour had shifted in ways that made Thylex's combat instinct scream warnings. When you order someone to act like a soldier, Sarah repeated, opening her eyes to meet his gaze, what exactly do you expect them to do? Thylex's hand remained on his sidearm, though the energy field separating them made the weapon unnecessary. I expect them to follow orders, to maintain discipline under pressure, to put duty before personal desires. And if those orders conflict with their moral code, a soldier's moral code is defined by their duty to their commanding officers and their nation. Sarah nodded slowly, as if she had expected that exact answer. That's what I used to believe too, Commander. Before I learned that some duties transcend rank structure. The ship shuddered slightly as external forces buffeted the hull. Through the single viewport in the detention chamber, Thylex could see the distant stars shifting position as the silent judgment changed course. Whatever was approaching them had prompted evasive maneuvers. "You said Captain Sarachin died 3 years ago," Thylex said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "If that's true, then who are you?" "I'm what's left when everything you think you know about yourself gets stripped away." Sarah flexed her fingers within the energy shackles, testing their resilience. "Do you want to know what really happened to the crew of the Meridian Dawn, Commander? Tell me." "They died heroes. Every single one of them. When your ships opened fire, they could have surrendered. They could have abandoned the mining equipment and fled. Instead, they stayed at their posts and gave their lives to ensure the colony's medical supplies reached the surface." Thylex consulted his tactical reports on his data tablet. "According to our sensors, the Meridian Dawn was destroyed in space. No supplies reached the planet. Your sensors were wrong. The medical shipment was transferred to escape pods and launched during the engagement. 18 pods, each containing enough antibiotics and surgical supplies to treat 500 people. They landed safely in the colony's central district. The claim was easily verifiable, but it would require contacting surface reconnaissance units." Thylex made a mental note to check the information later. "Even if that's true, it doesn't explain your survival or your cryptic statements about identity." Sarah was quiet for several heartbeats, her eyes focusing on something beyond the viewport. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of memory that hadn't been there before. "The escape pod I used wasn't designed for medical supplies, Commander. It was a standard personnel transport, rated for 3 passengers maximum. I wasn't supposed to be the one using it." "Who was?" "Chief Martinez and 2 of the junior engineers. They were the most critical personnel for establishing the colony's infrastructure." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I ordered them into a different pod and took the transport myself. Command decision. The captain goes down with the ship, but she also makes sure her crew gets home." Thylex found himself leaning forward despite his training. There was something in her tone that suggested this story was about to take a significant turn. "But you didn't go down with the ship." "No, I didn't. Because sometimes the universe has other plans." The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. "All stations, this is the bridge. We have confirmed multiple contacts approaching our position. Configuration suggests a Terran rescue fleet, but energy signatures are inconsistent with known human technology. All personnel prepare for potential hostile contact." Sarah smiled at that announcement, but it wasn't an expression of relief or anticipation. It was the kind of smile that suggested private knowledge of events about to unfold. "They're not coming to rescue me, Commander." "Then why are they here?" "Because 3 years ago, a certain Zephyrian interrogator decided to make an example of a captured human officer. And because that decision set in motion a chain of events that's about to change everything you think you know about this war." Thylex felt his gill slits flutter with growing unease. What interrogator? What example? Instead of answering directly, Sarah began working at something near her left wrist. Her movements were subtle, hidden mostly by the angle of her restraints, but Thylex could see her fingers manipulating what appeared to be medical tape wrapped around her forearm. "Do you know what the Iron Guard is, Commander?" The question hit Thylex like a physical blow. The Iron Guard was one of the Zephyrian military's most elite units, composed entirely of volunteers who underwent extreme psychological conditioning to become living weapons. They were known throughout the galaxy for their absolute loyalty, their technical expertise, and their complete absence of mercy toward enemies of the Republic. "The Iron Guard is classified information," he said carefully. "Not as classified as you might think, especially not if you've been their guest." Sarah continued working at the wrapping on her arm, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency despite the restraints. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago, the Iron Guard captured a Terran reconnaissance officer during a routine patrol near the Rigel system. Standard procedure called for basic interrogation followed by prisoner exchange through neutral channels. Thylex was beginning to understand where this conversation was heading, and he didn't like the implications. Standard procedure was not followed. Intelligence Command decided this particular prisoner might be useful for testing new interrogation techniques. Psychological pressure, sensory deprivation, chemical enhancement of pain responses. Sarah's voice remained steady, but her fingers had stopped moving on the wrapping. They wanted to see how much information they could extract from a human before permanent psychological damage occurred. That would be a violation of interstellar law. Yes, it would. It was also highly effective from a purely technical standpoint. The prisoner provided detailed information about Terran defensive positions, ship capabilities, communication codes, even personal details about individual crew members. Thylex found his throat becoming dry, and then they decided the experiment needed a permanent record, something to demonstrate the superiority of Zephyrian interrogation techniques over traditional methods. Sarah looked down at her left arm, where the medical wrapping was now partially loose. They decided to brand their success directly into the prisoner's flesh. The detention chamber fell silent except for the distant sound of klaxons and the subtle vibration of the ship's engines. Thylex stared at Sarah's arm, understanding beginning to dawn like the light of a dying star. "Show me," he whispered. Sarah smiled, but this time it was an expression of grim satisfaction rather than hidden knowledge. She pulled the remaining medical tape away from her left forearm with a single, deliberate motion. The brand burned into her flesh was unmistakable. The Iron Guard's insignia, seared deep enough to ensure permanent scarring, covered the entire width of her forearm from wrist to elbow. The mark was crude but precise, clearly applied with heated metal rather than energy weapons. Around the edges, Thylex could see evidence of infection that had been allowed to fester before finally being treated, but it wasn't just the presence of the brand that made Thylex's primary heart skip beats. It was the condition of the surrounding tissue. The scarring patterns, the specific discoloration, the way certain edges had healed incorrectly. All of it matched the techniques used by Interrogator Prime Vexthok during his experiments with human prisoners. "You're her," Thylex breathed. "You're the prisoner from Rigel 7. Captain Sarah Elizabeth Chin died in that facility," Sarah said, rewrapping her arm with mechanical precision. What walked out 3 weeks later was something else entirely. The report said you died during an escape attempt. Your body was vaporized by security systems. The reports were wrong. I did die, Commander, just not physically. Everything that made me human, compassion, fear, hesitation, doubt, all of it was burned out of me along with this mark. She held up her branded arm. What remained was purpose. Pure, focused, uncompromising purpose. Thylex's communication implant chimed again, this time with an urgent priority signal that made his head crest stand straight up. "Commander, this is the bridge. The approaching vessels have just transmitted a message on all frequencies. They're demanding the immediate release of prisoner 7 Alpha 9, and they're giving us 30 minutes to comply. What kind of vessels are we facing?" "Sir, our tactical analysis is inconclusive. The ships appear to be using hybrid technology, combining human engineering with systems we don't recognize. Some of the energy signatures match theoretical projections for adaptive weapons platforms." Adaptive weapons platforms? Weapons that learn from engagement data and modify their tactical parameters in real time. "Sir, intelligence suggests the Terrans have been working on such systems, but we've never seen them deployed." Thylex deactivated the channel and turned back to Sarah. "Adaptive weapons that would require real-time analysis of Zephyrian defensive systems. The kind of analysis that could only be performed by someone with intimate knowledge of our technology. The kind of knowledge you might gain during a 3-week stay in an Iron Guard facility," Sarah agreed. "You've been feeding intelligence to Terran weapon designers. I've been sharing what I learned during my education. The Iron Guard is very thorough in their training methods, even when they don't intend to be." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Thylex realized he wasn't looking at a captured enemy soldier. He was looking at the product of his own military's hubris, a weapon forged by Zephyrian cruelty and tempered by human determination. "The fleet out there," he said slowly, "they're not here to rescue you. They're here to retrieve their operative," Sarah confirmed. "I've been working with Terran intelligence for the past 3 years, providing technical analysis of Zephyrian systems and tactics. My capture was intentional, Commander. I volunteered to be taken prisoner, so I could observe your current operational procedures firsthand. You deliberately allowed yourself to be captured. The mining colony operation was designed to appear legitimate while providing a believable cover for my presence in Zephyrian space. The Meridian Dawn's crew knew they were likely flying into a trap, and they went anyway because they believed in the mission." Thylex felt reality shifting around him in ways that had nothing to do with the ship's evasive maneuvers. "They died to get you aboard this vessel. They died so that humanity could finally understand exactly what they're fighting against, and more importantly, how to fight back." The intercom crackled again. "Commander, the approaching fleet has begun active scanning of our vessel. They appear to be mapping our internal structure in real time." Sarah's smile widened. "That would be the adaptive systems learning your ship's configuration. By the time they finish scanning, they'll know the location of every critical system, every structural weakness, every possible avenue of attack or infiltration." "How is that possible?" "Because they're using sensors designed by someone who spent 3 weeks studying Zephyrian technology from the inside out. Someone who learned exactly how your ships are built, how your systems interface, and where the critical vulnerabilities are located." Thylex found himself backing away from a containment field, his tactical mind processing the implications of what Sarah was telling him. If the Terrans had truly developed weapons that could adapt in real time to Zephyrian defensive systems, then every strategic advantage his people had maintained for decades was about to disappear. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to understand something, Commander. When your people branded this mark into my flesh, they thought they were creating a symbol of Zephyrian superiority, a permanent reminder of human weakness." Sarah stood up from the interrogation chair, the energy shackles sparking but not restraining her movements. Thylex realized with growing alarm that she had been free of the restraints for several minutes, possibly since the beginning of their conversation. What they actually created was a reminder of what happens when you underestimate human adaptability. "This mark doesn't represent my defeat, Commander. It represents your species' first and last mistake." The lights in the detention chamber flickered and went out, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. In the distance, Thylex could hear the sound of hull breaches and the distinctive whine of teleportation systems activating. "They're boarding us," he whispered. "No, Commander. I'm going home, and I'm taking everything I've learned about your ship, your crew, and your tactical procedures with me." Sarah moved toward the containment field controls with the fluid precision of someone who knew exactly where they were located. As she reached for the deactivation switch, she paused and looked back at Thylex. "Tell me, Commander, when you order someone to act like a soldier, do you ever consider the possibility that they might choose to follow orders you never gave?" The turning point, the containment field, collapsed with a sound like breaking glass, and Sarah Chun stepped through the dissipating energy barrier as if walking through morning mist. Commander Thylex reached for his sidearm, but his hand froze halfway to the holster as he found himself staring down the barrel of his own backup weapon. "When did you?" he began. "During the first few minutes of our conversation," Sarah replied, checking the weapon's charge level with practiced efficiency. "Your security protocols assume prisoners will remain restrained. They don't account for someone who spent 3 weeks learning how to manipulate Zephyrian energy systems from the inside." The ship lurched violently as something massive struck the hull. Emergency lighting bathed the detention chamber in crimson shadows, and Thylex could hear the distinctive sound of atmospheric containment systems struggling to maintain pressure integrity. "How many ships?" Sarah asked, tilting her head as if listening to sounds only she could hear. 12 confirmed contacts," Thylex answered automatically, then caught himself. "Why am I telling you that?" Because you're a professional soldier facing an impossible tactical situation, and your training is telling you to gather as much information as possible before making critical decisions. Sarah moved to the chamber's single viewport, gazing out at the battle developing around them. Also, because you're starting to understand that cooperation might be your only chance of survival. Through the transparisteel, Thylex could see the sleek forms of Terran vessels dancing between the heavier Zephyrian warships. But these weren't the clumsy, purely human designs he was familiar with. These ships moved with an alien grace, their hulls shifting and adapting in real time to incoming fire. Energy beams that should have penetrated their shields were absorbed and redirected. Missile salvos that should have overwhelmed their defensive systems were intercepted by weapons that appeared from previously empty space. Adaptive hull technology, Sarah observed, following his gaze. The ships literally learn from each attack and modify their defensive configurations accordingly. By the time your gunners adjust their targeting solutions, they're shooting at vessels that no longer match their sensor profiles. That's impossible. Matter doesn't behave that way. Zephyrian matter doesn't behave that way. But it turns out there are entire periodic tables of elements that exist in dimensional spaces your scientists haven't discovered yet. We've learned to access some of them. A new alarm began sounding, this one indicating critical system failures throughout the ship. Thylex's communication implant crackled with increasingly desperate reports from various departments. Engineering reports power fluctuations in all primary systems. Navigation has lost helm control. Tactical says our weapons are firing on random targets. Sarah nodded with satisfaction. They're inside your computer networks now. The adaptive systems don't just learn from external observation, Commander. They also adapt by directly interfacing with enemy technology. You're talking about electronic warfare on a level that shouldn't be possible. 3 years ago, I would have agreed with you. But spending time in an iron guard facility teaches you that impossible is just another word for haven't figured it out yet. The detention chamber's blast door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a corridor filled with emergency lighting and the sound of running feet. Zephyrian crew members were moving with the controlled panic of professional military personnel facing a situation beyond their training parameters. Your crew is about to abandon ship, Sarah observed. The silent judgment has never surrendered to enemy forces, Thylex said with fierce pride. It's not surrendering, Commander. It's being systematically dissected by forces it can't understand or effectively resist. There's a difference. Sarah moved toward the open doorway, but stopped when Thylex didn't follow. Aren't you coming? Where? To the bridge. I assume you'd like to see how this ends. Thylex found himself torn between duty, curiosity, and in growing suspicion that his understanding of this entire conflict had been fundamentally wrong. You're not going to kill me? Why would I kill you? You're not my enemy, Commander. You're just someone who happened to be following the wrong orders at the wrong time. I'm a loyal officer of the Zephyrian Republic, and I'm sure the Republic appreciates your loyalty. The question is whether your loyalty extends to dying pointlessly when you could live to serve a better purpose. They moved through corridors filled with smoke and the acrid smell of overloaded electrical systems. Crew members they passed seemed too focused on damage control to pay attention to the human prisoner walking freely among them. Several times, Thylex caught glimpses of impossible things through viewport windows, Terran boarding parties moving through sections of the ship that should have been sealed against intrusion, energy patterns that formed geometric shapes before dissipating into quantum foam. How long have you been planning this? He asked as they climbed toward the command levels. The specific operation? About 6 months. The broader strategy? Since the day I walked out of that iron guard facility with their insignia burned into my flesh. And what is the broader strategy? Sarah paused at an intersection, checking the corridor markers with the familiarity of someone who had studied the ship's layout extensively, to demonstrate to the Zephyrian Republic that humans are no longer the helpless prey species you've been hunting for the past decade. We have never hunted humans. The conflicts between our species have been legitimate military engagements. Commander, in the past 3 years, Zephyrian forces have attacked 17 human colonies, destroyed 43 civilian transports, and subjected captured personnel to interrogation techniques that violate every interstellar treaty regarding prisoner treatment. Sarah's voice remained calm, but Thylex could hear an undercurrent of steel. If that's not hunting, what would you call it? Strategic necessity. Humans have been expanding into territories claimed by the Republic. Territories that were uninhabited when we found them. Territories that your people showed no interest in until we started building successful colonies there. They reached the command deck just as another massive impact shook the ship. The bridge was a chaos of flashing displays, shouting officers, and the distinctive smell of fear that transcended species boundaries. Captain Vexmore stood at the center of it all, his four arms gesturing rapidly as he tried to coordinate responses to multiple simultaneous crises. Report, he barked as Thylex and Sarah entered. Sir, we have complete system failures across all departments. Engineering can't explain the power fluctuations. Navigation reports that our helm controls are responding to commands we're not giving. And tactical. The weapons officer paused, his crest flattening with embarrassment. Sir, our own weapons are targeting our own ships. Captain Vexmore's gaze fell on Sarah, and his eyes widened with recognition. The prisoner. How did she escape containment? She didn't escape, sir, Thylex said quietly. She was never really contained. Explain. Sarah stepped forward, and Thylex noticed that every Zephyrian officer on the bridge instinctively moved away from her. Not from fear exactly, but from a deep recognition that she represented something outside their understanding of normal threat parameters. Captain Vexmore, I believe we need to discuss terms, Sarah said with the calm authority of someone used to command situations. Terms? You're a prisoner aboard my ship. With respect, sir, I'm an intelligence operative completing a successful mission aboard a vessel that's currently being systematically disabled by forces under my direction. Through the bridge's main viewport, they could see the battle had evolved into something resembling a medical procedure rather than a military engagement. Terran vessels had attached themselves to key points along the Silent Judgment's hull, their adaptive systems interfacing directly with Zephyrian technology. Energy patterns flowed between the ships like neural pathways, creating a network that pulsed with its own alien intelligence. What do you want? Captain Vexmore asked. I want you to contact Zephyrian High Command and arrange for immediate communication with the Republic Council. This engagement is about to expand beyond anything your military is prepared to handle. Are you threatening us? Sarah moved to the tactical display, her fingers dancing across controls that should have been locked against enemy access. The display shifted to show the broader tactical picture, and Thylex felt his secondary hearts stop beating. The Silent Judgment wasn't alone. Across the entire sector, Zephyrian vessels were reporting similar encounters with adaptive Terran forces. Dozens of ships were experiencing the same systematic infiltration and control that was paralyzing his own vessel. This isn't a rescue mission, Sarah continued. It's a demonstration. For the past 3 years, human intelligence has been analyzing every aspect of Zephyrian military technology, tactics, and strategic doctrine. We've learned how your ships work, how your crews think, and how your command structure makes decisions. She manipulated the display again, and suddenly the bridge could see detailed schematics of their own ship, complete with real-time status updates on every system. We know that your primary reactor has a 0.3-second delay between throttle commands and actual power output changes. We know that your tactical computers prioritize shield regeneration over weapons charging when power drops below 60%. We know that your communication protocols use rotating encryption keys that cycle every 4.7 minutes. Captain Vexmore stared at the display in horrified fascination. How could you possibly know such specific details? Sarah rolled up her left sleeve, revealing the Iron Guard brand burned into her flesh. Because your people taught me. Every technique they used to break me down also taught me something about Zephyrian psychology, technology, and operational procedures. Every lesson they forced me to endure gave me insight into how your military thinks and acts. Impossible. No prisoner could retain that level of detailed information under extreme interrogation. No normal prisoner could, Sarah agreed. But I wasn't normal anymore. The same procedures that were supposed to break my will also eliminated my capacity for forgetting traumatic experiences. Every moment of those 3 weeks is burned into my memory with perfect clarity, including every casual comment about ship specifications, every discussion of tactical doctrine, and every demonstration of Zephyrian technological superiority. Thylex found himself speaking without conscious intention. You remember everything. Everything. The exact frequency of the energy fields they used for restraint. The specific alloy composition of the branding iron. The molecular structure of the drugs they used to enhance pain sensitivity. The security codes they entered when they thought I was unconscious. Sarah's voice remained steady, but her eyes held depths of memory that made Thylex uncomfortable to contemplate. I remember all of it, and I've spent 3 years figuring out how to use that knowledge. The ship's communication array suddenly crackled to life with an incoming transmission on the emergency command frequency. The voice that emerged carried the unmistakable authority of Zephyrian High Command. This is Admiral Kexteron, Supreme Naval Command. All vessels in the Rigel sector are ordered to cease hostilities immediately and prepare for diplomatic communication with Terran representatives. Captain Vexmore stared at the communication panel as if it had just grown additional appendages. Admiral, this is Captain Vexmore aboard the Silent Judgment. We are currently engaged with enemy forces using unknown technology. Request immediate tactical support. Negative, Captain. Intelligence Command has reviewed the tactical data from all affected vessels. The Terrans have demonstrated capabilities that render continued military resistance. Inadvisable. You will comply with all reasonable requests from their representatives and prepare for prisoner exchange negotiations. Prisoner exchange. Vexmore looked confused. Sir, we only have one human prisoner, and she's standing right here, Sarah finished. Captain, the prisoner exchange isn't about me. It's about the 1,700 Zephyrian personnel currently aboard Terran vessels that materialized around your fleet during the past 30 minutes. The tactical display shifted again, showing the broader engagement zone. Thylex could see that while the Silent Judgment and other Zephyrian ships were being systematically paralyzed, their crews were being evacuated to Terran vessels with efficiency that suggested careful planning rather than improvisation. You're not destroying our ships, he observed. Destroying them would be wasteful. These vessels represent decades of engineering and manufacturing investment. It makes more sense to study them, understand them, and eventually return them to crews who understand their new place in the galactic community. What new place? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since their conversation began, it was an expression of genuine warmth rather than tactical satisfaction. The place that comes after the war ends, Commander. The place where Zephyrians and humans work together instead of trying to destroy each other. The Republic will never accept subjugation by human forces. We're not asking for subjugation. We're proposing partnership. The same kind of partnership that allowed us to develop adaptive technology and dimensional engineering in the first place. Thylex felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You didn't develop this technology alone. Humans are good at making friends, Commander, even with species that most people believe are extinct or impossible to contact. It turns out the galaxy is full of civilizations that have been watching the Zephyrian-human conflict with interest, waiting to see which side demonstrates the qualities necessary for broader galactic citizenship. And they chose humans. They chose the side that learned from suffering instead of inflicting it, the side that turned trauma into wisdom rather than using wisdom to create trauma. Captain Vexmore activated the ship's intercom system. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for crew evacuation to designated Terran vessels. This is not a surrender. This is A. Tactical repositioning pending diplomatic resolution. Sarah walked to the bridge's main viewport, gazing out at the impossible ships that had transformed a military engagement into a first contact scenario. Commander, 3 years ago, I would have given anything to avoid the experience that led me to this moment. But now I understand that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing you can do for others. And what's the best thing you can do? End a war that never should have started in the first place. Show two species that they're stronger together than apart, and prove that even the deepest wounds can become sources of healing rather than cycles of revenge. Thylex looked at the brand on her arm, understanding finally what it represented. Not a mark of defeat or victimization, but a symbol of transformation. The Iron Guard insignia burned into her flesh had become something entirely different. A reminder that strength could emerge from suffering, and that wisdom earned through pain could become a gift to others. The prisoner exchange, he said quietly. When our crews return to Zephyrian ships, they'll carry new perspectives with them. They'll carry the understanding that humans aren't the weak prey species your propaganda depicts, and that cooperation produces better outcomes than domination. Sarah turned from the viewport. More importantly, they'll carry proof that change is possible, even for conflicts that seem impossible to resolve. The evacuation proceeded with the same systematic efficiency that had characterized the entire engagement. As Thylex prepared to board a Terran transport, he found himself walking beside the human who had redefined his understanding of strength, intelligence, and the nature of warfare itself. What happens now? He asked. Now we build something better than what we're leaving behind, Sarah replied. It won't be easy and it won't happen quickly, but for the first time in years, it's actually possible. As their transport detached from the Silent Judgment, Thylex could see other Zephyrian vessels throughout the sector undergoing similar processes. Not conquest or destruction, but transformation. Ships that had been instruments of war becoming platforms for a different kind of future. The brand on Sarah's arm caught the light from the transport's viewport, and Thylex realized that what he was seeing wasn't just the end of a battle or even the end of a war. It was the beginning of something entirely new, forged from the decision to transform suffering into strength and pain into purpose. Sometimes, he thought, the most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys enemies. It's the one that turns them into allies, and sometimes the most important victory is the one that makes future battles unnecessary.